Cinemajaw is sponsored by Overcast, a better podcast app than whatever you're using right now. Unless it's Overcast. Get it now in the App Store, and we thank them for their support.
You're listening to Cinemajaw, the greatest movies podcast ever, recorded on location from our respective homes in Chicago. My name is Matt Kay, and with me is...
Rye, the movie guy, and sitting inside the fish tank is Filmy and Phil.
How's it going, guys?
This week on Cinemajaw, Matt, it is an exciting episode. It is our celebration of film for the year 2020, our top 10 movies of the year.
We had a couple of banner years in a row in film, and I don't think this was one of them. It did not continue the trend, Ryan. There are some good movies, don't get me wrong, but not a great year for obvious reasons.
I think one thing that bothered me, and I've talked about this before when we do this episode, is I love when I'm watching a movie and I say, oh, this is my movie of the year.
Yeah.
When you have that moment.
Yeah.
Sorry to report, it didn't happen that way this year. For me, anyways. I didn't have that aha moment. This is my movie of the year. I think you did, Matt.
I did.
You one particular film. So I think that's where you're going. But I didn't have that. And it really came down to just sort of narrowing it down, a lot of pencil on paper and where I sort of ranked things. And that's how I came up with my number one. Not that I dislike my number one. It just wasn't that big movie moment for me.
I understand. I guess the real question the jawheads are asking themselves out there is how many Adam Sandler movies are going to be on Rye the Movie Guy's list?
Oh, you know it, Matt. It would not be a top 10 list show complete, anywhere near complete, if we didn't have a great guest returning to do his top 10 with us.
Yes, back. I don't even know how many years in a row this is, but joining us in a few minutes will be the great Brian Tallerico from RogerEbert.com.
Yes, this is a tradition like no other. That's what they always say for the Masters. That's how we feel here on Cinemajaw when we record our top 10 with Brian. Besides that, we have more going on, don't we, Phil?
Oh, you know it. We're also continuing our celebration of Gary Oldman.
Nice. Since me, Matt, obviously the Jawheads have heard us reviewing films all year at home, we're going to ask Brian and go sort of round robin our pet peeves of sitting at home watching films. It's been sort of a pain, so we'll get through that. And as everybody knows, we like to play trivia here on the show. In honor of The Midnight Sky, we will be playing George Clooney movie trivia. So,
okay, we'll see.
Topic.
I mean, Brian obviously usually, I think exclusively has schooled me every year, so hopefully I can at least have a showing this year.
I did try to make them a little bit more difficult questions. Yeah. I usually give those 2 layups in the beginning. I didn't do any layups this year is all I'm going to say.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm ready.
All right. As Phil mentioned, we're still celebrating Gary Oldman this month. So let's start with a Gary Oldman fact.
Yes, this week we learned that the old man Gary was in 2 different tales of the TV. Gary Oldman has been a star on the small screen, receiving an Emmy Award nomination for 2 different guest appearances in Friends in 2001. On the 2-part episode, the one where Chandler and Monica get married, as Richard Crosby, a pedantic actor who insists that real actors spit on one another when they enunciate. And he also starred in David Bowie's music video, David Bowie the Next Day, in 2013, alongside Marion Cotillard, who he obviously went on to co-star in Dark Knight Rises with.
I have not seen that music video, but I'm going to watch it tonight after we get done recording.
Yeah, same here. I'm obviously a fan of Bowie, so Bowie and Oldman, I'm in.
Totally. Speaking of in, Matt, let me crack a beer open here in celebration.
Cheers.
We bring in our guest. He is the managing editor of RogerEbert.com. He is the president of the CFCA. He's the Don of film critics here in Chicago. Brian Tallerico, welcome back to Cinemajaw.
Guys, that's quite an intro. The Don. I guess that's all right. I like it. I'll go with it.
How about Czar? You like Czar?
No, that's worse. That sounds scarier.
King?
King sounds a little pretentious, doesn't
Pretentious.
it?
All right, we'll go with Don then. That works.
How you guys doing?
Doing pretty good. How's 2020 been treating you? How'd you get through it all?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, it was rough, lots of anxiety and stress, but I mean, we have to keep everything in perspective. And I don't know about you guys, but I haven't lost anyone close to me or significant amounts of work. And so I have to consider myself lucky in that regard, given the rest of the country. So that's the way I look at it, especially this time of year. I was just talking to someone about the number of people who will be missing someone at Christmas this year and thinking about how I won't be. And I'm lucky in that regard. So hate to get serious right off the bat, but yes. And I feel like I had a rough, anxious year, but certainly not as much as some people.
It's good to keep things in perspective, man.
Yep.
As far as the movies go, you heard Matt talking at the top there about years past. We've had some banner years where Matt's thought this is some of the best films compiled in a given year. This year, it seems Matt's take is that it's been a little bit weaker. What's your take on 2020 in a nutshell?
There's been a lot of good stuff. If you looked for it, you had to dig a little deeper and find it. And one thing I do like about this year that I want to push back on a little bit is I feel like there's been, because of that, perhaps because there hasn't been so many Hollywood movies taking up space and noise, there's been a lot more diversity and representation in what I've seen this year. Yeah. I've seen a lot more films directed by women and Black people and other minority groups. And someone a few years ago asked me what I wanted to see more of in film and art in general. And I said voices I haven't heard. So I feel like I got a lot of that this year. I feel like I heard a lot of voices I haven't heard before. And so I think in that respect, it's an interesting transitional year to hopefully more of that, where that can coexist alongside the Adam Sandler and the MCU and all that stuff.
Right on, man. I'm right there with you. I wonder how much of that was the pandemic and how much of that was the protests this summer, or maybe it was just the perfect storm. Whatever it is.
All of it. I mean, the fact of the matter is the big Hollywood studios mostly pay white men, and all their movies got pushed to 2021. So a lot of the big white male directors left the field, leaving some space open for other people. So I think that was a big part of it.
That's a plus for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You heard me mention also at the top that watching movies at home, normally we got pet peeves of going to the theater and people are talking about people eating their popcorn too loud, the annoyances, those little things. What is it at home, being trapped, watching movies, film festivals, doing all that stuff, but doing it virtually at home? What's been your pet peeves?
There's a lot of things that come to mind. Time management is hard with 3 kids. You have to homeschool and like 5 jobs. So in other words, when I tell the wife and kids I'm getting in the car or getting on the L to go see a movie, I'm done. I'm off. I'm not at home. So it's a separate space to appreciate the film in. So separating work life and home life has been, impossible this year. There is no separation between work life and home life anymore. And then this is super inside baseball, but I think you'll understand the variety of screening platforms out there suck. There needs to be some unity in what the studios do in terms of how they get us films to see that isn't out there yet. And I'm hoping that comes, because some of them are just garbage. Some of them are picture quality that I don't think the artist and filmmaker would want your film to be seen in. So I'm always trying to find the best way to appreciate a movie. And I feel like sometimes the studios don't allow that. So that can be frustrating. Those would be my 2.
Yeah, I'm right with you, actually. That one that you mentioned, the different platforms as far as this getting these screeners digitally has been just an absolute pain. And one movie, thankfully, it made my top 10, and we're going to talk about it later, was so good that I got past this distraction, but I could not get the counter of the movie. I'm talking about the actual time that's left and the dot that's going across.
Scrubber, yeah.
No matter what, I couldn't get this thing off the screener.
Exactly as the director intended, of course.
It drove me nuts for the first 5 minutes. Stop, try to do this. It just would not go off. Well, luckily, like I say, it was such a good film. I finally just saw past that. But boy, those annoyances and sticking with it, I curse out Amazon especially. They're the biggest culprit.
I'm not going to name names, but their screening platform is horrendous. It's absolutely horrendous.
I don't know how they think this is the norm. I get it if you're watching episodic television and they want you to watch the next episode. I've counted it out. They give you 3 seconds, and I'm talking an actual 3 seconds.
You mean at the end on Prime when you're watching something? Yeah, that's horrible.
But when you're watching a movie that's 2 hours and 15 minutes, who actually wants Amazon Prime? Mind you, it's going to be a random selection. They're going to put on Water for Elephants right after I just sat down watching a 2 hour and 15 minute movie. And I've fumbled for my remote because I want to watch the credits. I want to see, who produced this or who wrote this. And I don't get it in time. And then you try to go back and it starts the movie from the beginning again. It is, I'm irate at Amazon at this point.
Sometimes it's not even the credits. On Small Axe Mangrove, which you should all watch, he's putting the names of the Mangrove 9 up on the screen, which I don't consider a credit. That's part of the damn movie. He wants you to read each name one at a time, and it's going, watch Water for Elephants in the corner, and it would have zipped past the 9th name if I hadn't grabbed my remote because I wanted to see all 9 names. That's not the credits. That's part of the film. So it can be even worse than that.
Yeah. Those are my pet peeves. Matt, you got anything to tack on?
Boy, you guys, let me tell you something. Aside from the occasional buffering issue, no, I love watching these movies at home. It's been fantastic. Now, I do agree with Brian that getting out of the house, getting to that space, especially for recording this podcast, as we speak, my kids are still up watching The Mandalorian, but being able to watch at my own time, at my own pace, if I do get interrupted or if I have to pee, I can pause the movie, do what I have to do, get back to it a little later. If I want to rewind a scene or something that wasn't clear or rewatch something while I'm taking a note, I can do that. So convenient, so wonderful to have access to new studio movies at home. And she's in some way, and don't get me wrong, I'm a big proponent of the theater system, but I think we all need to change with the times. And I hope that this is one thing that sticks from this era we're living through.
So you're a big fan of the HBO Max deal. We're going to get off track if we talk about that too much, but
I think that the people screaming are old man yelling at cloud. It's just, it's not going to kill the theater industry. Just like books didn't kill imagination and film
Amazon
didn't kill
Borders.
What?
Amazon killed Borders. Different delivery systems kill industries all the time.
Amazon killed Borders, fine, but did Amazon kill books? Did they kill writers?
They changed the industry a lot. I mean, there are no Tom Clancy's and big major names anymore. The book industry is entirely different than it was when bookstores existed. And I think it's naive to think that if Warner Brothers goes all and then Hulu and Disney are about to follow, if there are no major movies, there are no AMCs, there are no major movie theaters. Music Box and stuff will exist. The multiplex can't survive without movies like Disney, Warner Brothers, Fox, etc. They won't exist. And that's fine if we want that, but we should recognize that. I'm fine that Borders is gone. We should recognize that it's going to change.
Things are going to change whether we want them to or not. Now, let me just give you one thing to think about, Brian, because it dovetails nicely with the point that you made earlier, and that's accessibility, diversity. There are people that are not wealthy and don't have the access, people from communities that don't look like ours that can't see all these movies. And now they can. And I like to think that artists, filmmakers make these things to be seen by as many people as possible. So
I just think the finances will have to change. You can't spend $300 million on a Netflix movie so someone can see it in Peoria. You know what I mean? Like there will have to be, the numbers will change just as they did in the book industry. Things will have to change. And that could be, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying people who are like, oh, this is the end, or this is like, both extremes are wrong. Things are going to change, but it's also not the end of film. You know what I mean? Like
totally.
That's what it needs, but what needs to be said. So
Agreed. I think I can sum this up with screw Peoria and screw Water for Elephants.
There you go.
I got no rejoinder to that. That's perfectly said, Ryan.
All right. We're going to hold our review of The Midnight Sky till after the break because everybody loves our top 10 of 2020. All right, Brian, also at the top, you probably heard me say that I had a tough time narrowing it down, at least my number one. Was this a difficult top 10 to narrow down, or did you already know, hey, these are the 10 standouts?
I've had to submit several top 10s already, so I kind of know where mine is at. I will say my 10 and 11 are like as close as could possibly be, and I kind of alternated them. So I might let you guys pick randomly which one it's going to be because I can't decide. But other than that, no, I think the order is pretty set. And I tried to rewatch a few, although I didn't have a lot of time to do so. By the end of the January, I usually rewatch most of my top 10 just to kind of see where things fell and where they're going. And I haven't had much time to do that because I've been cramming. The Chicago Film Critics Awards nominations were due today. So I've been cramming in as much as I possibly could. I watched a documentary and a foreign film today, just in case they were nominated. Like, I'm really getting down to the wire here. And they both were. So there you go.
Nice.
Oh, good.
Good to hear. All right. Well, you're our guest, and you're getting us started with your number 10 and possibly your number 11. Let's hear them.
No, I'm not. I don't like ties. So you want the doc or the animated film?
Well,
let's
go with the
potentially
doc.
Both. Yeah.
Let's go with the doc because I think I might have the animation film on my list.
Okay. And then I'll just say if you do later. The doc is a really great movie in terms of editing and space and time and cinematography. It's called Time. It's a movie called Time, and it's about so many things that I can't really get, and I don't want to get too deep into this because I know we're going kind of quickly through 10 to 7, but it's about relationships with people behind bars. It's about our criminal justice system. It's really just about getting older too, and progression and existence and family and commitment. And it's about so much just wrapped into this beautifully shot, beautifully edited, perfectly put together. My pick for the best traditional documentary of the year, not to spoil something coming in later, but the best traditional documentary of the year, I'd go with Time.
Yeah, I have seen this one, and I think I was mentioning it to Matt actually off recording last week when we got done, but we were still talking. And talk about beautifully shot. I mean, you're using old footage that was shot on a camera phone. They must have then taken that old footage and turned it into black and white, right?
I think so. It's also just perfectly edited. I mean, it covers a lifetime practically. It covers years with this woman trying to get her husband out from behind bars. And it's just there for all these key moments. And it's really nuanced and graceful and perfectly put together. It's a model of documentary editing.
Yeah, I agree. Check that one out. I believe that's streaming on Amazon Prime, right?
Yep. Watch the credits.
I'm going to write that
Don't
one.
go underwater for elephants.
That one's going in my journal, man, because sitting at number 10, I also have a documentary. I'm becoming a bigger and bigger and bigger fan of documentary. I've always loved them. And I missed Time, unfortunately. I did not miss this one. Arthur Jones made a movie about Matt Fury's Pepe the Frog in Feels Good Man. That's where I was going with the animated and documentary because they mixed the two to great effect here. It could have been just a fly on the wall, or it could have been just a talking head. And they have both of those in this film. But with the animation, it just balanced everything out so nicely. And, of course, it's the movie, I think, that The Social Dilemma, which got all the water cooler talk, wanted to be, to expose the seedy underbelly of the internet. I think Social Dilemma is an after-school special compared to this movie, which is an actual look at the real dark side of the internet and how it could take something innocent and corrupt it. It's a fascinating movie. What you got,
nice
Ryan?
Pick at number 10. I come out swinging big. No documentary, no animated documentary. This, I believe, I'm probably right actually thinking about it, is the only movie on my list that I saw in a movie theater. And I say this, Tenet is my number 10. And Tenet was put in a very difficult spot, right? It already has the heavy expectations of being a Christopher Nolan film. And then because of the pandemic and the way it was released, it suddenly becomes what is thought of as the savior of movies there for a little while. No film can live up to that. But why it's on my list is I have one word, Tenet. Joking. No, the word is structure. A lot of thought went into piecing this crazy time loopy film together. It also wowed me a couple of times. The reveal in the middle and the ending sequence, I was floored by. And to be absolutely honest, those were the only quote unquote, using air quotes here, wow moments for me in 2020 where I had that like, oh my goodness, this is awesome in a film. So Tenet lands at number 10 on my list. Any complaints here, Brian? Did you hate Tenet?
I did not. No. I respect that Christopher Nolan is probably the only guy who can get a major studio to give him that much money to make something that crazy. Like Tenet is insane. And so I like people who have worked their way. The fact of the matter is we live in previously made, look at the Disney announcements the other day. Everything is a previous IP. So the fact that there's someone as crazy as Nolan out there who can get the money to make movies like Tenet, I appreciate that. I don't think it all works. I've only seen it once. I don't know if you went back and revisited it. I've heard it has there's a lot of benefit to doing that. And I saw it the only time I saw a movie in the theater since the pandemic started. So there was a significant amount of anxiety and mask wearing and discomfort. So I would like to see it again at home when I have time. Having said that, it was nowhere near my top 10. I think it's a solid 3-star movie.
I agree with you, Brian. It's nobody structures a movie, a narrative like Christopher Nolan. I mean, it's becoming his thing to create these layered and looped and twisted narratives. And I applaud him. And you're right. Nobody else could have made such an audacious movie. But he's just drinking a little bit of his own Kool-Aid too much. And it really kind of showed this year. And I want to state for the record, because I could, and I had some choices, I went ahead and watched Tenet on my phone, and I loved it. It's also not in my top 10, spoiler alert, but it was just fine on a phone.
There it is. Tenet on his phone, just fine. Tenet for me, my number 10. Into our 9s we go, guys.
It's me. How do I describe this movie? It's my most popular review of the year because in the review I was just like, I don't even know what to tell you. And that's Charlie Kaufman's I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Really, which we talked about ambition a lot with Tenet. This is ambitious as all get out. It's not a movie you kind of have to give yourself over to tonally and structurally and just roll with it, not worry about dissecting it or figuring it out. And then in terms of craft and performance, I think Jesse Buckley and Jesse Plemons and Toni Collette are all phenomenal. David Thewlis is phenomenal. The cinematography, the editing, it's just a wonderfully put together movie. One of the few movies from this year that I'm very positive people will be watching 10, 15, 20 years from now. I really feel that way, especially when Jesse Buckley becomes a massive star. So.
I think that's the case with a lot of Charlie Kaufman's films, right? I mean,
give yourself over.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give yourself over, and then I think they just become better as time goes on. They age really well.
Yeah, adaptation still rules. Oh, Eternal Sunshine is still amazing.
Absolutely incredible. Yeah.
Yep.
So,
I mean, no arguments here.
Yep. Matt, what do you got sitting at 9?
This one is kind of an example of what Brian was talking about earlier, a film that I don't know would have gotten quite as much attention in another year, but it did. Never, rarely, sometimes, always. And it is directed by a woman, Eliza Hittman. And it's a story of two young girls who make a sojourn to the city from the burbs in order to get an abortion, under the radar without her parents knowing. It's raw. It's honest. It was very well acted. And I think it's just an unflinching look at a reality that a lot of people don't like to talk about. And certainly not a lot of people make films about. It was something I can't remember ever seeing such an honest take on this issue on the screen, and just really well made. Beautiful to look at too. Not exactly an uplifting movie, perhaps, although I think there's some hope there. But the look of it, the color palette, everything's chef's kiss.
Saw that the world premiere at Sundance, and you could hear a pin drop in that room. Especially, you could hear a pin drop for most of the movie, and then you could hear tears during the scene that we all know. You heard tears during.
Absolutely.
The scene that gives the film its title.
Yeah. It's worthy.
I'm a big fan, Matt, so maybe we'll talk about this movie again tonight. But I will say this, Matt, we can't jump to a different movie bigger than this jump that we're about to make here. We go from a film like that into just a blast, a comedy of a film. It was a Hulu movie. It starred Andy Samberg, Kristen Milotti. I'm speaking of Palm Springs. It lands at number 9. And yes, it's not that original. We talked about this when we reviewed it here, but Palm Springs had the confidence to make it its own. The opening sequence with Sandberg's character reliving the wedding that he is at for probably the 100th time, who knows how long, had me laughing out loud numerous times. And it also saddened me because I remember thinking, this would have been an absolute riot in the movie theater. This would have been...
I saw it at Sundance.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. So this would have been...
It absolutely... I saw it at midnight at Sundance. People were dancing in the aisles. It killed.
So I when I saw it, I thought, oh my God, this would have been this year's Hangover, that event film that's super bad where you go see it and then you just tell everybody that you got to go see Palm Springs. It happened this time sitting in my living room, and I didn't have anybody to tell, you got to go see this movie too. It's more
you told
just like
me, Ryan.
Well, I told you, and we told the Jawheads here on Cinemajaw. It's just not the same as seeing a comedy in a packed house and laughing your head off. But we've talked about it, and I think most people know Palm Springs, but
I think so.
I think one of the best, and I think as far as a comedy goes, definitely one of the best of the year.
I'm sure. It's funny. I watched it when it came out too, and it played differently after the pandemic when every day was the same over and over again. So,
it kind of accidentally had that going for it.
A lot of movies this year did.
No doubt.
So that was my number 9. Into our 8s. What do you got there, Brian?
Speaking of movies that played differently in the pandemic than they could have thought, I don't know if you guys saw this or talked about it. It was a South by premiere, and South by was right when the world collapsed. I don't know if everybody remembers. That was in early March, and I remember watching the South by press conference and texting with a few friends, like, are they really going to cancel it? And then, of course, everything got canceled for the next 8 months. But it's a movie called She Dies Tomorrow by Amy Seimetz.
We saw it.
I have seen this one, yeah.
It's a fantastic movie. It's a piece about contagious dread. It's a piece about, and we all felt contagious dread this year to a certain extent. We all felt that feeling of something's wrong. Something's wrong in the world. Something's wrong in my house. Something's wrong in life. And it's about that feeling being passed from person to person. It's a really hard movie to describe, but it's a mood piece. It's a surreal, ambitious, unforgettable little movie. So that's my number 8.
I was not that big on this one. Matt, I think you liked it more than I did.
I did. Mood piece is actually a really good describer for this. It's a different kind of movie.
It doesn't need an explainer. You don't pull it apart. You just kind of, in that sense, it's kind of reminiscent of some of David Lynch's work in that you just kind of have to go with the mood he's going for and the dread he's often going for, which she's going for here. I think it's great.
Yeah. And
original.
Listening to other people and reading other reviews of it, I just didn't connect to that dread. There's sometimes where you feel that they're trying to push it on you and you're not connecting to it. That's just how I felt with it.
Surrealism is very subjective, like in terms of if that's going to work for you, if the mood is going to work for you, if there's nothing literal to hold on to.
Well, guys, speaking of surrealist horror, that swings it over to me, and this is where I slot in another female-directed movie by Josephine Decker this time, Shirley. I thought Elizabeth Moth's, every year it seems like she's giving us a movie that we're talking about toward the end of the year. No exception here. There's some surreal elements. The setting is so wonderful. And also it's part of this trend I've been noticing about powerful women and having affairs with other women, young ingenues. There are, I think, at least 2 or 3 this year. And Shirley was also kind of eye-opening because I wasn't that familiar with the writer, and subsequently after watching the film went down the Shirley rabbit hole and kind of fell in love with not a new writer, but one that I hadn't been as familiar with. So I liked it on many, many levels.
I'm a fan of this one as well. I'm glad to see it on your top 10. Sort of shocked me. This is a good one.
Oh, that's another movie I saw at Sundance. This is the Sundance top 10. I mean, it did really feed through most of the year. I didn't engage with it at Sundance as much as most people have since, but Sundance, we've talked about this before, I think, on this podcast. It can be a really weird experience. Like, surely movie 3 of a 5-movie day, 5 days into a festival can play a little differently than when it's the only thing you have to concentrate on. So I have not had a chance to revisit it, but I want to.
I think you should. Yeah.
I didn't hate it at all. It just didn't wow me like it did some other people in Park City.
Fair enough.
My number 8 is the film I talked about that I don't want to go too deep into, as I think we're going to talk about this one a little bit more, I would say, when we get closer to our top picks. But it is Chloe Zhao's Nomadland. And, she gives us a somber beauty here. And as I said, it was just a couple of weeks ago that we reviewed this on the Jaw, that Frances McDormand reminds us that less is more when you're trying to make a film authentic and full of human emotion. Unbelievable performance. The cinematography is downright gorgeous. The score is perfect. And the scene between Fern and Swanky brought the second most tears, I think, to my eyes in 2020. I'm going to stick a pin in it right there, as I'm pretty sure the other two people I'm talking to here liked it a bit more than I did.
It's going to be the only movie on all three of our top 10, not to spoil anything, but you've already teased it. I guess we'll see.
We'll see.
All right, here we go into our sevens. Brian, what do you got sitting there?
Another Sundance movie. I didn't realize we were all just going to batter around Sundance movies. Pretty sure everything we've mentioned played at Sundance, except for Tenet. Tenet did not play Sundance. My number 7 is The Nest. Sean Durkin's drama starring Jude Law and Carrie Coon about a couple that moves to England in the 80s as he tries to chase money that he's not really smart enough to earn, and collapses under the weight of his materialism. It's a fascinating movie. It reminds me of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and other great theater about disintegrating marriages and couples. And Carrie Coon and Jude Law are career best film work in this movie. They are both incredible. It's honest, it's raw, it plays like a horror movie at times, which is fascinating to me. The way Durkin uses this giant house, a house that Law keeps looking increasingly small in frame in because he can't fill it with his needs and desires. It's a fascinating movie. Another movie I think people are going to be watching and admiring because it feels like a classic to me.
We're going to be doing our favorite scenes of the year in a couple of weeks, but definitely one of them takes place in this movie. Might not make my top 5, but there is a scene where this couple goes out to order dinner, and the wife ends up ordering everything from the waiter. That scene was incredible. I absolutely loved it. Carrie Coon
is amazing in this movie.
So
like
good.
Just the way there's a scene where she's smoking and drinking coffee and driving and listening to Heart all at the same time, and I'm like, I'd marry that woman.
I like me some Jude Law. Good pick there. Going to my number 7. This is where I think you guys might disagree with me on this one, but I really liked it. It was Chris Swanberg, and I'm talking about I Used to Go Here.
Wow. This is big at number 7.
That's the deepest cut you've ever had in your top 10 that I've done.
No, come on. Well, there was no Avengers
movie
movie
made
this
like
year.
$4,000, but get into it. I think it's probably the lowest grossing film that's ever been in your top 10. But go ahead.
Brian, you see the good work I'm doing here with
No,
Matt.
I know. We're working on it together. Chipping away. It's erosion.
You know, I keep telling this story, but Ryan walked by Lloyd Kaufman. I'm like, oh my God, there's Lloyd Kaufman at a convention. And he was like, who?
No. See, that's bad too. You got to have both.
I know.
I know.
So I'm working on him as well.
That's good. You should know who Lloyd Kaufman is, right?
But I think this fits in there. This is, like you said, it's kind of a micro budget indie thing. It feels almost like the Goonies in a way, right? Because it's like this ragtag bunch.
The kids and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And they have an adventure, and there's some really funny scenes with what's the character's name? The odd one, tall Peter or something.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I saw this.
That's a Southside movie for me too, which it feels like 4 years ago.
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a different kind of story, obviously somewhat local to a degree. Jermaine Clement is in it, who I absolutely love and everything. So there you go, number 7.
Wacky hijinks didn't work for me. Her going over with the kids and getting stoned and driving around, I thought probably not going to happen. But I like it more. It's fine. It's just not in my top 10.
Yeah, I liked it quite a bit. Not near my top 10, but very fun movie. And yeah, I forget the tall character's name, but they call him Tall whatever.
Tall Brandon. I'm almost
Tall
positive.
Brandon. Yeah, or Tall Brandon or Tall Brad. That scene where
great. She's a great writer, director, great person, great Chicago talent. So I like you having Chicago talent on the list. That's good.
There you go.
There you go. All right. My number 7 is an animated film. I think this is what Brian was going to have at number 10, but I could be mistaken. But in my opinion, it's the best animated film of the year, Wolfwalkers.
Yep. That's it.
All right.
It's a great movie.
Yeah. Now, we just reviewed this on the podcast last week, so I'm going to keep it somewhat brief. But as I mentioned, the artistry on display all the way around is simply amazing. The hand-drawn animation is so beautiful and presents a different style than we're used to seeing. Although we get familiar themes, the story is unique, and I love the music, especially the song Running with the Wolves and that entire sequence in the film.
Yeah.
I needed that. I needed that in 2020 to have one of those moments.
The let it go moment.
Clapping. Yeah, I was actually like clapping when it was going on. I'm like, God, this feels good watching this movie. I really loved Wolfwalkers.
It did.
This is an Apple TV Plus exclusive. So Jawheads, there's enough out there to at least check it out, and you could probably watch a few films and get your $6 worth.
Oh, get a free subscription for like a month. Watch Beastie Boys Story. I don't think that's on anybody's list to spoil, but it's great. Maybe watch Greyhound if you're in the mood for old war stuff with Tom Hanks. Watch a few. There's a few series that are good. Servant, which is M. Night Shyamalan's show.
You went right over On the Rocks.
Yeah. Okay. On the Rocks is on there too. There's a show called Mythic Quest that is really great. So, yeah, Apple TV is worth it for at least a month.
There you go.
But I love Wolfwalkers. I love the human touch of Wolfwalkers. I love the hand-drawn aspect. Even when you can tell there's some computer enhancing, it always feels like there's a human touch behind that movie, which is what I feel is lacking from so much modern animation. Like I don't want to rag on anyone too much, but the Illumination movies, like the Despicable Me movies, all the stuff that feels made by a computer, I'm getting increasingly annoyed by, especially because I have kids who watch movies all the time. And I miss like that hand-drawn, it doesn't have to be hand-drawn, but just to feel the human connection to it. It reminded me of like Miyazaki's movies. It's got a lot of Miyazaki in it. I mean, it's basically got the Mononoke industry wood stuff going on. And so it's got a lot of that aspect, and I love Miyazaki. So I love it.
Who doesn't? Yeah.
I also mentioned it sort of felt like a Zelda game to me with the theme of turning into the wolf, right? So I was all behind that. And you're right, the human element, the eyes of the characters, the way they were drawn and the close-ups to them, can't go wrong with Wolfwalkers.
I will say one of the cool things about this year was for TIFF. I don't know if you watched that as part of TIFF coverage. It premiered at Toronto, and my whole family got to watch the world premiere of Wolfwalkers on my TV at home. So that is a benefit to seeing world premieres. Bringing my wife and kids to virtual film festivals is kind of neat.
There you go.
They all loved it.
It wasn't the world premiere, but we all watched it. My whole family as well, and my kids also really enjoyed that.
Into our sixes, guys.
Never, rarely, sometimes, always. So we've already talked a lot about that. That's my 6.
All right, swinging it over to me. I'm going with Spike Lee here, guys, The Five Bloods, containing what I think was the best acting performance by a male lead from Delroy Lindo. I think that Chadwick Boseman, not to give our Oscar predictions here, but may overshadow that since we unfortunately lost him this year.
Yeah.
But if you want to watch what I think was actually the best performance of the year, watch The Five Bloods. I mean, Spike Lee's no slouch, right? He's, especially the last couple of years, been coming out with hit after hit. Black Klansman was phenomenal. I don't think this is quite up there with Black Klansman, but it's pretty damn close. I loved The Five Bloods, everything it stood for, and it was just a really good movie that came at a really good time.
Yeah,
one of the most important American filmmakers who ever lived. It's not just the last couple of years; it's 35 years.
Oh, for sure,
genius. There's been dips, there's been valleys.
Yeah.
But if you really, I think we're finally reaching a point where we can look at the totality of his career and be like, just be blown away. Like there's 100%. Such consistency, and the peaks are insane. They're so high. And even when he's in a valley, it's usually ambitious. I mean, there are a couple like, I don't know what you were doing there. But for the most part, his misses are swinging for the fences misses, which I'll take over leaving the bat on your shoulder every single time. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. We actually did an entire month in the summer, right around the time of
celebrating Spike Lee.
Celebrating Spike Lee. It was actually
cool,
serendipitously well timed. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm old enough that Do the Right Thing is kind of my major changing movie. I was 14 when that movie came out, and my dad took me to see it in 89. So, and that was not just for the movie, but for what it was saying and what it was doing. I was lucky enough 6 years ago to see it at Ebert Fest, projected in the Virginia Theater in one of the biggest screens I've ever seen, with the loudest sound system I've ever seen. And Spike was there, and I'll just tell the story really quickly. My wife had never seen it, and she was with me, and it comes on, and Fight the Power is booming so loud that the seats are shaking. And my wife goes, someone should tell him she whispers to me, someone should tell him to turn it down. And I go, Spike is 3 rows behind us. He'll tell them to turn it down if they want to. So he wanted it that loud. And it was amazing. It was an amazing experience. That movie, he's made several unqualified masterpieces and a bunch of other really great movies.
Agreed.
Yeah.
One other comment on Da 5 Bloods, because it's not on my list, just outside my top 10, is I remember when we watched it, it seemed like at that time in the year, I'm talking here in 2020, it seemed like the big storytelling, complicated films were lacking at that moment. And here came Da 5 Bloods, and it just was something to like actually chew on as far as a movie goes. It came when we needed it most.
That's exactly what I was saying. Yeah, it was sort of accidentally well-timed. But you're right. It was also in the middle of a slumping summer season where we didn't have those tent poles to sort of climb up. And here comes Da 5 Bloods to sort of rescue the summer.
Yep. My number 6 pick, this was the film I mentioned in my pet peeve at the top of the show, where I could not get the counter off of the screener. And I thought this was just going to absolutely ruin the movie. And then lo and behold, the movie I watched was my 6th favorite of the year, The Father, starring Anthony Hopkins and directed by Florian Zeller. This is, so he actually wrote a stage play, and he is actually adopting it, and this is his directorial debut.
Hopkins?
This is
Florian Zeller.
Florian Zeller.
Okay.
And this is a stunning directorial debut. We get to see an inside and terrifying look at an aging father who's played by Anthony Hopkins, losing his fight against dementia. And the film is structured so we see the conversations from the father's point of view, and it allows us to see some facts, names, and places stick, but that his brain no longer can tell when these conversations happened, and the confusion sets in. Also have to say, this is the best Anthony Hopkins performance since Silence of the Lamb.
Wow.
Just totally blown away how much I enjoyed The Father. And I think the buzz around this was the idea that Anthony Hopkins was giving this powerhouse performance. And
amazing. He's amazing. I mean,
he is. And this hit home, to be honest. So it was one of those films, watching it, that I thought, well, maybe I'm attached to this a little bit more than just the average moviegoer would be. But I was blown away by how good the overall experience was of watching The Father and how powerful it was. I was a mess at the end of this thing.
And we don't want to get too Oscar-y, but you mentioned Delroy and Chadwick. Anthony is going to be deep in that race for that award too, because like you said, it is one of his 2 or 3 best performances, in my opinion. He is ridiculously good in this movie. And the editing in The Father, I hope that gets an Oscar nomination too, because it is the way the cinematic language frames what he's going through without spoiling anything. The movie kind of, more than any movie I think I've ever seen, visually represents dementia. And not in like a
100%.
not in like a surrealistic way, but in a confusing way. You know, where am I and what am I doing, without overplaying it though. Like when you think about the movie and go back to it, the editing is so subtle in the way it throws you off, in the same way he's thrown off every single day and increasingly so. It gets worse and worse and worse. That's another movie that sadly I didn't have a chance to revisit since I saw it at Sundance, but I thought about it, and I'm going to revisit it before we vote for CSEA, probably this weekend, because I think it's phenomenal.
Yeah, there's a scene in there where he's having sort of what you would call as a good day, and he's sort of happy. Right. And he starts to talk about, that he used to be a tap dancer, and he just loves the presence of this one particular caretaker who they're more or less interviewing. And oh my God, I mean, it's supposed to be sort of a happy mood scene, and right. It was crushing at the same time. I was like sort of like laughing and crying at the same time. And for a movie to do that, it's doing something absolutely right. It's really,
there have been
really
a few movies this year that I'm not sure escaped their theatrical origins. I'm not sure Ma Rainey avoids being a play, obviously kind of a filmed play.
Yeah.
And the Father has that a little bit because it all takes place in the same apartment, but the way he uses cinematic language to further elevate the issues of the film, of the story, I think is really impressive.
Yeah. Hey, Phil, can we throw that in the fish tank when The Father is streaming? Let the Jawheads know, because I didn't look that up.
Oh, it's not even theatrical until February. They're doing a late Academy push for it. They did a qualifying run for awards lists primarily, but they're releasing it theatrical late February. I would look for streaming like April, May. It's a long ways away.
Okay.
There's gonna be a couple movies that try to get into that new late Academy window. Judas and the Black Messiah is going to try to get in there. The Billie Holiday movie might get in there. French Exit is going to try to get in there. And the father, Sony Pictures Classics, did a qualifying run. They did a qualifying run by literally releasing it on like Angelica's, the New York virtual website for like a week to say, okay, now this qualifies for awards for critics.
Wow.
So that's pretty much the only way it's been out so far.
Well, I loved the father, so I guess Jawheads, write it down and do make sure you check that one out when it
You'll hear a
comes out.
lot more about that in the next 4 to 5 months.
Yeah, love that one. All right, into our top 5, the heavy hitters here, guys.
We were talking about Spike Lee just a minute ago, but it's not the movie you think it is. It's David Byrne's American Utopia, which is a wonderful, beautiful, joyous experience. A concert film that mirrors Stop Making Sense, which is my favorite concert film of all time. You might disqualify it. You might say it's a TV movie because it was on HBO. It premiered at the New York Film Festival, so I'm qualifying it, and I absolutely love it. I think it is a wonderfully directed, edited, put together piece. Spike brings you on stage with David and his wonderful group of musicians and dancers, and it's perfect. It's joyous in a year that did not have a lot of joy.
I've heard this called one of the best concert films of all time. And I've only, obviously I've seen a few concert films. I haven't seen this one yet. Not a huge David Byrne fan, so I guess
still think you'd love it.
Yeah,
I really do. It's got so much, and it's got Spike's energy to it. He weaves in social issues, and it's part of the play too. In other words, it's merging two incredible artists in David Byrne and Spike Lee, and presenting a show in a way that you could never otherwise see it. It's not just a recorded concert, and anyone who thinks it is crazy. The way he opens, he'll time a song to a certain beat, the editing of it. In other words, he'll open each song with like a shot of an instrument or a shot of a musician. He'll bring you on stage or over the stage in ways that you never could be from the audience. He makes you a part of the experience. And it's a show, David Byrne's show, where he plays a lot of new songs, but a lot of old stuff, is a show about community and trying to reach out to people and connect, which is what film and Spike and David have been doing their entire careers.
Nice.
Well put. This is the first movie that's come up that I have not seen on the list. And it actually brings me to a third pet peeve that I guess I didn't bring up and was reminded of. You get a lot of these emails at the end of the year with the screeners, and I've been putting them in one folder to watch, and I'm cramming this last week. And I've seen this talked about. People have said how much they love it. I was going to give it a watch. I thought I had the link to the screening inside the email. No, it was just an email saying if I want a link to email the person. Well, it's 10 o'clock at night when I wanted to watch this, and I just haven't gotten to it. So
get that HBO Max free subscription, buddy. It's on there right now.
We're going to get it here.
We're definitely getting it. Yeah.
It's so great. You'll love it.
How could we not get it with all
it was RogerEbert.com's number 3 of the year, to give you some idea from all of our critics. So I'm actually a little lower on it. I believe of our 18 critics polled, I believe it was 5 people's number 1. That's how great a concert film this is.
I probably read about it on RogerEbert.com.
We have talked about it quite a bit.
Yeah. All right. I guess that swings it over to my number 5. And I'm actually going to need to get a judgment from the jury here, because potentially this is a 2019 film, but it certainly came out in 2020. This is an odd year, like Brian was just saying. And I'm going with Blow the Man Down at number 5.
That's a 20. Yeah, that's a 20 film.
All right.
That qualified for CFCA and everything. It was on Hulu in 20. Where did it play in 19? Oh, at Fantasia, I think.
It didn't get a release. It premiered at Tribeca, and then I think it was at Toronto.
I think it's Tribeca and Fantasia, but it didn't get a release in 19. You're fine.
Okay, cool. Two females at the helm of this movie, both in front of and behind the camera, and it's an accidental trend on my list, but like we were saying this whole episode, it's been a year of that, which is a good thing. Blow the Man Down sort of takes us to this old sea shanty type town with these guys that are singing these old songs, the Salty Dogs, but it has almost nothing to do with the males in the story whatsoever. This is a town that's a matriarchy, and there is a crime syndicate run by women that is running a sort of a brothel out of a bed and breakfast. And it's this quaint New England town by the sea that you would not expect. You'd
I love
expect
it.
people to be knitting doilies and, sitting in rocking chairs. And this crime story starts to evolve. And it was shocking in a way. I'm not going to tell you that this is a shocking movie, but I think the juxtaposition of those two things was a little shocking in a good way. And it's gorgeous. Like just the way they shot everything, the sea and whatnot. I had a lot of fun with Blow the Man Down.
No arguments here.
Matt is digging deeper into indie cinema than he ever has. When we talked about I Used to Go Here, I think Blow the Man Down probably made less than I Used to Go Here. So it's very impressive. It's a movie that for some reason I didn't respond to when I saw it. I've seen it mentioned a lot recently on year-end stuff, so I will revisit it.
Yep.
Don't worry, Harley Quinn is coming, okay? Don't worry.
Is she? No.
Maybe.
This is just outside my top 10. And it was a real nice highlight because I think when we saw this, it was right at the beginning of the quarantine. And we were talking about doing Cinemajaw remote and how this is all going to work. What films are we going to review? I know this was one of the first films we reviewed when we were doing this via Zoom.
It was among the first, yeah.
Right. And I remember thinking, well, geez, if we get more films like this, we're going to have no problem because this is a fun movie to talk about and we can dig a little bit deeper, especially that cast, Margot Martindale as the lead of the matriarch. Just fantastic.
It really was.
Great one. Definitely check that one out. It's an Amazon Prime exclusive. My number 5 is a film that has come up, and that is Charlie Kaufman's I'm Thinking of Ending Things. And it was probably the biggest discussion we had all year on one particular film here on Cinemajaw. And I repeatedly said that this movie put me in a funk. It depressed me. I didn't feel good after the movie. But that was not to say I can't appreciate how damn good of a movie it is. It just put me in a funk, and that's what sometimes good art can do. Some movies put you on cloud 9 and some get you to think about things that maybe you don't want to think about, but you do. And that's what I'm Thinking of Ending Things did for me. And we've talked about the Jessies, Plemons and Buckley being fantastic in here. And when we first meet them, they're driving to meet his parents. And that car ride is long, it's snowing. And we, the viewers, at least I did, felt like I was trapped in the car with them. And Charlie Kaufman explores themes of being trapped in the life you were living and showing us what ifs and dreams that could keep us plugging along. It's a deep movie. I'm not saying it's for everybody, that's for sure. But if you're looking for something complicated, I'm Thinking of Ending Things. By far one of the best films of the year.
I loved it. It's just so depressing that after I watched it, I immediately put it out of my mind. It was almost like an endurance course of a film. And again, I'm not saying that it was bad, but it takes something out of you to watch this movie. And
you're describing my number 4. You literally are describing my number 4.
Oh, all right.
An endurance test that takes something out of you to watch it.
Let's get there.
We need a little foreign flavor on these lists. It's a Russian film called Beanpole. It's about 2 women after World War II coming to terms with who it's hard to even explain, coming to terms with how they are trying to escape a past that they can't really escape because of trauma and injury. It's about wartime trauma, but in a way I've never really seen before, in a way that makes it feel really human and immediate. Without spoiling anything, they both have wartime injuries that are going to impact every decision they make for the rest of their lives, but especially over the course of the film. It's got 2 insanely naturalistic, great newcomer performances. It looks amazing. It was directed by a 27-year-old, which makes me feel older than anything has all year long. He's so incredibly talented at 27, and he's one of those talents who's going to be like at Cannes for long after I'm gone, probably, because he's just so good and so young. And it is you talked about an endurance test. It features an inciting incident that is probably the hardest thing I had to watch all year. And then there's other things. It feels like every scene is going to end with tragedy. And some have complained that it's miserableism because of that. But to be honest, Russia after World War II was kind of a miserable place to be, especially for young women. So, and I think the filmmaking is so invigorating that I don't mind the miserableism. And so I think, yeah, Beanpole, it's on Canopy. and some other streaming service. Check it out. Our RogerEbert.com top 10, just to plug us for a second, this year, at the bottom of each entry, you can click a button and watch it immediately streaming wherever it's streaming.
Oh,
so
that's
check that
great.
out. Yeah.
That is really nice. I have seen this one, Brian. This was one I caught just cramming through screeners here at the end of the year. And boy, am I glad I caught it, because I didn't know much about it, to be absolutely honest, going into it, or hear anybody really talk about the movie. And totally, wow. I mean, a tough watch is right. And I know the scene you're describing. When it was happening, I actually thought, well, this isn't really going to happen. Don't tell me. Oh my God. And
Right.
I almost like slid out of my chair. Like I didn't want to watch the end of the scene. And oh God, heartbreaking film. But I'm right with you. Yeah, absolutely gorgeous. The colors in the film. There's that one shot where she's wearing the green dress and she's got the red top on. I'm like, oh my God, this thing is literally gorgeous looking at it.
The Oscars weren't a popularity contest. They would get costume design, art direction, cinematography, editing, and maybe an actor, actress, and supporting actress nomination.
Beanpole. Do check it out. Nice pick, Brian.
This is actually right in my queue because I was trying to get some more foreign films under my belt before we do our awards. So I'll have to watch this one. But at number 4, as it were, I have Palm Springs, guys. We didn't talk about J.K. Simmons at all.
Wow. Right. Go right ahead. I didn't know you were going to have this at number 4. Wow, this is awesome.
I disagree with the assertion you made earlier that this is not the most original film. It's, of course, the time loop thing. We've seen it, Groundhog's Day. You can even throw Back to the Future in there, perhaps. But I think that the Lonely Island guys kind of just took it and made it different enough that it didn't feel unoriginal. In fact, it almost felt like maybe we're looking at a new subgenre in a way, like this time loop subgenre. It was just a fun science fiction comedy that came out of left field and sort of knocked you down. And probably the best feel-good movie of the year.
Yeah,
I'm with
probably.
you. Yeah,
I'm trying to think what else falls into that category. It's got to be that. There was not a lot of feel good in 2020.
No, there wasn't. And I do remember I was outside and I was trying to crack a beer open the way Andy Samberg does, how he always has his one hand. He just sort of cracks the beer. So it did make an impact on me where it was like, I was thinking of Palm Springs, you know.
It's educational. It's educational.
Could you do it, Ryan? Did you muster the manual dexterity?
The first time I actually dropped the can right out of my hand, it sort of cracked open. It was completely embarrassing, but I did get the hang of it and I started cracking beers with one hand.
He also shotguns a few beers in that too. That's a technique you
work
should
on that. Work on that, Ryan. Get back to us.
All right. Well, I have a strange pick at number 4. And wow, this movie really blew me away here. I'm just going to go out and say it. My number 4 pick is Black Bear.
Oh, cool.
Interesting.
I like Black Bear a lot.
We have not talked about it on Cinemajaw. It's directed by Lawrence Michael Levine. It stars Aubrey Plaza and Christopher Abbott. And it's really open to interpretation, which I absolutely love. And it's split into 2 acts, the film. We open up with Allison, who's played by Aubrey Plaza, who is a filmmaker coming to a house in the woods owned by a couple that basically are trying to get their house to be almost like a retreat for artists to come to. And she's there to work on her screenplay. However, the first night turns into a wild mess of sorts: sexual tension, jealousy, truth, lies. It all happens. Even a bear in the middle of the road. Now, the second act is where things get meta, as we see a film being made with the same actors playing, but sort of different relationships here. Both acts of the film go places I would have never guessed. And the ending, the way Levine does it, makes it open for great conversation. This was a film I actually ran to the internet afterwards to see what everybody was thinking. If they were on the same page as this is what I thought was going on, this is what I think, and seeing what everybody else had to say of what their interpretation of what the end was. I love those kind of films. And not only that, but very much in the way that you look at something like a David Lynch. I always talk about how much I love Mulholland Drive, and people are confused, but you can still see how great the filmmaking is and appreciate what's going on, even if you don't necessarily understand it. I love those kind of movies, and I think Black Bear fits right into that. It was right in my wheelhouse.
When did you catch this one, Rye?
Maybe a week ago.
Yeah, 'cause
Again,
I
this
think
was
we got
one
the
of the
screener, right?
screeners.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the screeners that came, and I wasn't sure. Seemed to be absolutely honest from the few people I follow on Letterboxd before I saw it, were mixed. I saw like one good one and one middle of the road, and I thought, well, I don't know what this is. Let's check it out. And
Blew
it
you
hit for
away.
me.
Here it
It hit
is
for me.
in your top
Brian,
5.
what do you think?
I'm a fan. I'm assuming I'm the good one you follow. Yeah, I'm a big fan. I saw it at Sundance, not knowing anything going in. Even the split is really the way to appreciate this. But even if you know it, I'm not sure that Lynch. I don't think it's as surreal as Lynch, because I think it's more self-acknowledging that it's an acting exercise and like a character exercise. It's kind of saying, hey, let's play with some themes here, and we're going to show you that we're playing with these themes here, and personal themes. I mean, the guy who directed it is married to Sofia Takal, who's a writer. Aubrey Plaza's dated Jeff Baena, who's a director for years. So they're all playing with these different themes about director-actress relationships is a main theme in there. And it's Plaza's best work, and I think she's a fascinating actress. She's phenomenal in this.
She's great.
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
And movies about movies, those lists always come up. This would definitely be one of them. And it's actually probably one of the more realistic, especially on like a low budget film being made. All those behind the scenes footages were fantastic.
I remember pitching this to you to review, Ryan, and I think you turned up your nose to me.
Oh, you didn't pitch anything.
I will go back through our messages and verify that.
Sarah Gadon's great too, as long as we're talking cast. Sarah Gadon is the third key player in this movie, and she's phenomenal.
She is, absolutely. I believe that one you can find on VOD. I don't think that's associated with any particular streaming service.
I believe you're right. Yep.
Throw it in
if
the
you get
jaw box
confused,
just in case, Phil, okay?
Or you can go to RogerEbert.com and just click the button at the bottom of the review, right?
There
Top
you go.
of the review. Review, star rating, picture, where to stream it, right there.
Bingo.
And our review is 3.5 stars by Sheila O'Malley, and it's a great piece of writing. It's about the craft of the review of the film. Yep.
Nice. All right, I'm a little nervous here. We're in our top 3. Brian, hit me.
Some may say it doesn't qualify, but I think we need to talk about Small Axe. I think we need to talk about Steve McQueen's series of films that premiered on Amazon Prime, but also played the New York Film Festival. And I'm not going to put all of them in one spot. Don't worry. I think that's cheating. But I think Lover's Rock is an amazing piece of filmmaking. You talk about mood pieces and transportive films that take you to a different place in time. It's a house party. It's like 78 minutes long, maybe not even that long. But he accomplishes so much in this tight little frame, in this tight little space at a house party in West London in the 80s. And it is a masterful piece of filmmaking in terms of craft, in terms of tone, in terms of use of music, in terms of the way he makes you a part of this party, moving the camera in and through the rooms, makes you a person who's there. And man, did we all need to go to a house party in 2020.
Agree with you there, man.
Absolutely. I'm glad you're selling me on this one because I have seen it. And I don't want to say I disliked it. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I would recommend watching Lover's Rock. But after compiling my top 10, I sort of dug around on people's top 10, not Brian's, because I like to be genuinely surprised on the podcast. But I did see other people, Clint Worthington, a couple of people that we've had on the show. And I was like, whoa, I can't believe they have Lover's Rock on their top 10. It's sort of a short film. I agree with the craft of the movie and how it was made in this very small space was absolutely mesmerizing. The music was great, but I didn't think it was top 10 material, but you sort of sold me there, Brian.
It's the RogerEbert.com #1 of the year. In other words, when we composite all of our writers together, it was the highest ranked film.
Wow.
I would argue that there's a certain, and we could get into this deeper sometime, there's a certain sense that like the best movies of the year need to be about serious subjects or big things. The craft of this movie for 72 to 78 minutes, whatever it may be, being sustained and maintained for that long is incredibly difficult. Like in other words, we like to say things, it looked great, but as if a lot of movies look great. Not a lot of movies look great. Like that craftsmanship is valuable. And when we're putting together movies that we love, and the movies that sustain have a high craft value. people will watch Lovers Rock for decades, especially because Steve McQueen is one of the best filmmakers alive. So and you could say that it's kind of representative of some of the other movies in Small Axe. I think Mangrove is phenomenal. But I think Lovers Rock is the standout, largely because of the sustained mood and the craft, and just, I find it so, I was blown away at how he was able to keep the feelings of it and the mood of it going for the entire time.
So what you're saying then, Brian, is speaking of Amazon, Small Axe is better than their Blumhouse 4 films.
I reviewed all of those, and yes. So, but just to fill people in a little bit quickly, and then we'll move on. Small Axe is an anthology series on Amazon. It was BBC produced. There's some controversy as to whether or not it's TV or film. The Small Axe films will be Emmy eligible, but Steve McQueen has come out and said he wants each of the 5 films judged as a film. And so they are CFCA eligible and eligible on my list and eligible on the RogerEbert.com.
But as far as
it's
the
a weird
Oscars,
time right now.
As far as the Oscars and Emmys, it's going to go Emmys and not Oscars.
It's going to go Emmys. So people like Letitia Wright in Mangrove, who's amazing, will likely get an Emmy and not an Oscar.
Interesting. Yeah. I've seen those 2. Those are the only 2 so far that I've watched. I'll watch anything Steve McQueen does for the rest of my life. But so far, I've only had time to watch 2 of them. And those were the 2 that I have seen.
Both in my top 20. Those are the 2 best.
I've heard nothing but good things. So clearly another one for me to jot down in my catch-up list for awards. All right, gents. I talked earlier when I was talking about Shirley about a movie that sort of opened my eyes to something. And this happens all the time on Cinemajaw. Like, Rye the movie guy had no idea who Pepe the Frog was, had never seen him on the internet, which blew me away. But I had never heard of this phenomenon, this event that takes place in this film. And of course, I'm going with Eurovision Song Contest, the story of Fire
Yes! I am so excited. Oh, I love this pick, Matt. I love this pick. I can't even tell you how happy I am that this is this high on your list.
Oh, loved it.
It's marvelous. Keep going.
This is right outside of my top 10. I'm not joking. I
Really?
had a tough time keeping it off. Great pick, Matt.
It's funny. We talked about crowd pleasers this year and we forgot that one.
Yeah.
This might be the crowd pleaser of the year.
Oh, I am so excited. That is awesome.
I mean, this movie, first of all, we had that crappy downhill. I don't want to say it was a crappy movie. It was a remake, and Will Ferrell was not good in it. Downhill.
No, it was crappy. It was very crappy. Downhill.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus her performance was pretty good. Almost rescued it for me.
Doesn't even feel like that was this year, but go ahead.
No, it doesn't. That's what's so funny. I talked about remembering every beat of Never, Sometimes, Rarely, Always. Downhill came out at the same Sundance and feels like 10 years ago. It shows you how like quality lingers, but stuff like that, it's like, oh yeah, that was this year.
Force Majeure is 100 times better. No contest there. But speaking of contest, back to Eurovision. And thank God we got this movie to rescue Will Ferrell, because I almost thought, well, I don't know if he's got another one in him.
It's his best comedy in a decade.
I agree with that. And I'm hard pressed to think of another one that I like more, even though you could say objectively he has better comedies. I liked this one so much. It was so fun. And I had seen Dan Stevens before, but I had never seen Dan Stevens before this movie. He's fantastic. A breakout performance. Rachel McAdams is hilarious as well. There's a sweetness to it. Not to mention the backdrop of Iceland and then the rest of Europe that they travel through is beautiful. It's a damn good comedy.
There's literally no reason for it to be 2 hours, maybe even a little bit longer. That's my issue with Eurovision. Like if they could have made a tight 100-minute Eurovision with another musical number or two, because that centerpiece musical number where they do like the medley is phenomenal.
Yeah, the song
I wanted more of that. Yeah. I wanted like 1 or 2 more of those and lose like 20 minutes and it's a perfect comedy. Because there's a lot of stuff in it that's great. And I think I tweeted after rewatching it the other day, because my wife had never seen it, that if you have a Best Actress Musical Comedy Award like the Golden Globes do, and you don't nominate Rachel McAdams for that movie, there's no point in having the award. Like, it's a musical comedy where she's perfect at both parts of the category. Like, also, we need to talk about Rachel McAdams' comic timing. Game Night. Her comic timing in Game Night is flawless. Her comic timing here is flawless. I don't want to get too hard on a movie we love, but the idea that they need to have some sort of unrequited love thing didn't really work for me either. Like, I don't love that she's in love with Will Ferrell because that's kind of silly, but it's just a silly.
Well, it's supposed to be silly. I mean, silliness is kind of the theme at the center of the movie.
But we talked about it when we reviewed it. We weren't really sure if, Will Ferrell and the way it just, those two together didn't seem right.
He's awesome, though. And she's great in everything. She's great in drama. Yes. She's great in comedy. Rachel McAdams is underrated across the board.
I'll end it with this. I talk about when I'm watching a movie and I'm having a few drinks, maybe a whiskey and a couple of beers like we're having tonight. And I say, well, I can't necessarily watch another movie after this, but I want to watch maybe a couple of scenes. I put something on. I have watched 3 scenes from Eurovision multiple times, Matt, 3 to 5 times.
Volcano Man?
The songathon that Brian talks about. Mm-hmm. I love the moment when Iceland starts to get the votes from the other European countries. It's so great. Like, they're confused at first, and then everybody starts jumping on board. I love it. And then the big musical moment where Rachel McAdams sings her song, and she's singing in Icelandic, and just unbelievable scene.
I think my favorite line delivery of the year, and I'm talking in any movie, is "The elves went too far." When the boat explodes, she went to the elves. It's perfect. The elves went too far.
There's some really good stuff in there. Yeah.
Not to mention, when we reviewed it, Brian, I went into detail about how I had actually traveled to Lisbon, and they were hosting Eurovision. And I had no idea. I was the normal dumb American that didn't even know what Eurovision was. And we didn't know why hotels were so expensive. We didn't know what was going on. And we went into the Eurovision village. I mean, it's a whole, the city basically is all about Eurovision when they're hosting it. It's awesome.
The funny thing is there were a lot of like high profile Netflix awards bait that fell flat, like Hillbilly Elegy and maybe Mank. I'm not sure if it's higher for anybody, but I like that Eurovision might be the highest rated Netflix movie on your list. I think that's phenomenal.
There you go.
Matt, you made the show. I'm telling you, that was fantastic. I was like upset that Eurovision wasn't going to come up, and then it came up on your list. That's so great. As I get into my top 3, we've been talking about diversity. And I do want to say, I noticed this looking down at my notes, my top 3 all directed by women. Here we go. Number 3 has not been mentioned. Never had the chance to talk about this one on Cinemajaw either. My number 3 pick, I got down for the best ensemble of the year. I don't know if that is an award that the CFCA has, Brian, but you should have a best ensemble, right? I'm going with Baby Teeth.
I love Baby Teeth. Baby Teeth was in my top 10 until very close to the end of the year, where I saw a couple things and moved some things around. I think it's my 12 after Wolfwalkers. Okay. Baby Teeth is great.
Awesome. So you're up on this one. This is directed by Shannon Murphy. As I mentioned, one of the best ensembles of the year. And it's about a terminally ill teenager who falls for this like small-time druggy guy who the parents can see right through, the viewer can see right through. But for some reason, this particular druggy guy actually makes the teen happy. And the teen does not have that long to go. And so at the end of the day, the question the film is asking and the parents must ask isn't that what really matters, is that the daughter is actually happy hanging out with this particular person. And one of my favorite scenes of the year is when Mila has Moses over for dinner, and her mom at this point is high as a kite on drugs that were given to her by her father, who's played by Ben Mendelsohn. This is just a hilarious scene. It's at the very beginning of the movie. And it's through the laughter that we get connected to this family, get to know these characters. So when the drama actually hits in the final act, it strikes a heavy blow, man. Wow. I mean, the tears were flowing at this one.
We should clarify. It's a terminal cancer diagnosis teen romantic drama, which on paper should be horrible. It should be Fault in Our Stars, which is actually okay. But you know what I mean.
You're forgetting Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl.
Yeah, it should be YA nonsense. But there's an honesty to the performances and to the writing. Mendelsohn in particular is just, always phenomenal, but particularly phenomenal here. It's basically a 4-character piece almost exclusively. Oh, there's the neighbor. But the 4 main actors are just incredible in it. Just consistently great. And yeah, that final scene, I could cry right now if I think about it for too long. And it's not manipulative and it's not melodramatic. It's just part of it is the performance is just grounded so much. Mendelsohn finds the truth in the melodrama and grounds it in something you believe in and relate to.
Yep. I mean, it's amazing when you watch so many movies as we do that some movies, because they're doing it right, you connect to the characters and you want to be with this family and you want to see them succeed. And this is one of those. I mean, you just are along for the ride with everybody involved, so that when the drama happens, it's happening to you, the viewer, as well. It's just baby
It's on
teeth.
Hulu right now.
It is on
Jawheads.
Hulu. Yeah. This is definitely a must watch, Jawheads. I know we have not mentioned it here on the podcast. Do yourself a favor, have some laughs, and then have, a box of Kleenex nearby for the end. It's a great one. Into our twos we go.
It's already been mentioned, and it's the second Spike Lee film in my top 5. I think Da 5 Bloods is an amazing piece of work. I think it's powerful. I mean, I was talking about how important I think Spike is previously when it came up, so I think we've probably covered it. But talk about a movie that hit the zeitgeist at the right time. I mean, with everything that was happening in the country when Da 5 Bloods came out, I always say that, like, film doesn't exist in a vacuum. It responds to the politics of the day and the atmosphere of the day and the day you had. Like the day you had at work, the day you're having with your wife. That's how art is a conversation between you and the viewer. And the conversation between Spike Lee through Da 5 Bloods to the world when it came out was amazing. Like, it felt like nothing else. It was like, oh, hey, honestly, as crazy as it sounds, it was like, oh, hey, movies are going to be fine. Like, even through all this nonsense, we're going to see really powerful, ambitious works of art, even when we can't leave our houses. So that's my number 2.
I'm not gonna argue. I'm not gonna say you had it too high or anything like that. It's absolutely worthy. Da 5 Bloods is a fantastic movie.
And performance of the year with Lindo, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That performance he's been phenomenal for decades, and it is just everything. It is 2020. It's angry and vulnerable in different ways. It's like there's just so much going on in his work in that movie. If he doesn't get an Oscar nomination, I'm not watching.
And then Jonathan Majors too.
They're all great. Oh, yeah. They're all great.
Every one of them.
Yeah, every single one of them. Which is a testament to Spike, who should also get an Oscar nomination.
Absolutely. Speaking of great filmmakers, Sacha Baron Cohen had quite a year this year.
This is
which one are you going with, though?
Is it or isn't it? Because there's two ways to land here, and I'm going with the absolutely wonderful. Man, I love the pregnant pause here. I'm going with Aaron Sorkin, The Trial of the Chicago 7. I mean, Borat 2 was good, guys, but it wasn't.
Borat 2 is better.
You think Borat 2 is better than The Trial of the Chicago 7?
Yeah, but go ahead. Sorry,
Brian's
I jumped in.
crazy. Brian's crazy.
I don't know about that.
Put down the whiskey.
The Trial of the Chicago 7 is another one that I think is illuminating. I think it speaks to the time we're in, whether that was on purpose or accidentally.
It does do that, yes.
Aaron Sorkin, for my money, writes the best dialogue. Is it realistic? Perhaps not, but it is so unbelievably satisfying to listen to a Sorkin scene. Just you can close your eyes almost and listen to it. You got the heavy hitters in this movie. I mentioned Sacha Baron Cohen, Eddie Redmayne, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and they're playing heavy hitters, some real people from history like Abby Hoffman and the rest of the 7. I just loved it. I loved every second of it, and I think the turn at the end of this movie when it goes from sort of a lighthearted farce of a courtroom drama into something that actually says something when Baron Cohen is on the stand. I think it works. It hit me. It was a damn good movie. It's my number 2.
And that, like when we reviewed it on the show, that ending that you're talking about is actually the part where I had the biggest problem with the film. I was all along for the ride, and I still am high on the Chicago 7. It's probably in my top 20. But for me, the ending, when he really goes for it there, I thought was way too melodramatic and didn't work for me. So that's where I fit. I landed on that. All the way up until then, I was on board with the Chicago 7. It was the ending that killed it for me. Brian?
The ending is a problem for me, too. I have issues before that. It's a movie that is about a protest movement that doesn't feel like it has any dirt under its fingernails. Like even the protest house where they all stay feels like, too much like a set to me and too much like costumes. And that's part of Sorkin's overly manufactured dialogue. In other words, everything feels so scripted. None of it feels organic. And the protest movement needs to feel dirty and dangerous and organic to work for me. I will say, I gave it a thumbs up. I think I gave it 3 stars. The ensemble is phenomenal. So it's not a movie I greatly dislike, mostly for that reason. If you look at it as a performance piece, I mean, you mentioned a few, but Mark Rylance, Frank Langella, Abdul Mateen, they're all just incredible.
Yeah.
So as an actor's showcase, I think it's definitely worth seeing. I feel like Sorkin is such an interesting personality and persona because he needs a director who can hone in and shape his talents, like Social Network, can take his work and say, okay, here's what to do with it. When he's a director, he falls in love with his own work a bit too much. He falls in love with his own dialogue and reaches for that big moment at the end, which didn't work for Ryan and I. And I feel like a director would have been like, no, here's where we get a little gritty. Here's where your language is a little too flowery. Here's where your ending is a little too Hollywood. Like another director would have shaped this into a masterpiece, whereas right now it's just a good movie.
I mean, I suppose that is a fair criticism, definitely. But you know what? This is only his second film as a director. So, sophomore slump.
And to be honest, it's fair to say, hey, I loved 12 performances in one movie and loved what it was saying and what it was doing, which is, I think, why I gave it 3 stars. Like it's a hard movie to hate, in my opinion. I just feel like there was a better movie buried within it.
There.
Yeah. And I love seeing Sacha Baron Cohen in these type of roles.
Very strong. He's great.
Keep bringing it. I like it. My number 2, like I said, directed by a woman, and the second film, if I'm keeping track correctly, to appear on all 3 of our lists. This is where I have Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, directed by Eliza Hittman. And we've talked about it, so I'm not going to go too much further into it, but Sydney Flanagan, who plays Autumn, I think, we said this when we reviewed it, I think she gives one of the best acting debuts in movie history, full stop.
I agree. Kelly Ryder's incredible too.
Yes.
Her cousin.
Her cousin, absolutely. The focus is not on who got Autumn pregnant, but on the lack of communication and the lack of help that young girls have with issues like this. And as the film shows, the problem is not coming from just one source, right? We see how Autumn is treated by her parents. I mean, the idea of talking to her mom about these things seems impossible. The social aspect of friends and what they think and talk about, which is such a heavy influence on young people. It's just a crazy situation sometimes. And these kids feel literally trapped, like they have no one to talk to. And when that release finally comes in what I think, for my money, I guess the spoiler in a couple of weeks when we do our best scene, but is the best scene of the year. Yeah. It is when Autumn's being interviewed by the health worker there.
All right, so I'm going to ask you some questions. They can be really personal, and all you have to do is answer either never, rarely, sometimes, or always. It's kind of like multiple choice, but it's not a test.
Okay.
Okay. In the past year, your partner has refused to wear a condom. Never, rarely, sometimes, always.
Literally crushed me. I mean, so moving and so powerful. And I just want to say it's done in basically a single shot that doesn't move, and it's just on Sydney Flanagan, and it's just subtle expressions by her that start to open up this character and everything that she's been through in such a way that is not overacted. It is just on point and devastating. I love this performance. It's
important that, though, we express to people who haven't seen it that it's not a message movie. It's not a universal story. It's a very specific character study. It's about these 2 people in these 2 places, 2 places, Pennsylvania suburb and then New York, at this time doing this thing. Like, I think she very consciously is not reaching for some sort of broader universal message. She's presenting 2 fascinating characters going through something. If you relate to it, great. And that's really the movies that achieve universal, like, oh, I can see myself in that movie, usually do so by being specific. And Hittman is incredibly specific in this film to the story of these two two girls, and it's a great movie.
It is out on video on demand. Again, not associated with one specific streaming site.
It's on HBO Max. It's on HBO Max right now.
There you go. Another reason to get that damn HBO Max subscription. That was my number 2. Never, rarely, sometimes, always. This is Cinemajaw. This is our picks for number 1. I already know Matt's, and Brian hasn't said this movie, so now I'm sure Brian has it at number 1. So Brian, take it away. Your number 1 pick for movie of the year 2020. What do you got there, buddy?
I don't think we've ever had a co-number 1. And does Matt really not have Birds of Prey on his list? I'm stunned. Birds of Prey was all right.
I liked it a lot, actually.
Yeah, I thought it was fine. But I thought we'd see it somewhere. Things really have changed. It's Nomadland, which I think is a perfect movie. It's the movie this year that I felt the strongest emotional attachment to. I think it came along at the exact right time in terms of what we were going through as a country, in terms of trying to deal with the sense of change. It's about change. It's about things aren't what they used to be, and how do we progress from that, and how do we find community again, which we've all kind of lost this year. And I think it's gorgeous. I think the way Zhao blends real people with actors, there's really only 2 actors in the entire film, Frances McDormand and David Strathairn, and everyone else is natural newcomers who've lived this life. The way she blends documentary and fiction is remarkable. The cinematography is incredible. The use of music is perfect. The ending is my favorite ending in so long. I can't even talk about it without crying a little bit, because if you watch it again, and I think Matt loves it, so maybe he'll watch it again, and maybe you will too, Rye. Think about what she's doing in that final scene in terms of, without spoiling anything, moving on, with coming to terms with things. The ending of Nomadland is so amazing. I just had to sit there and soak it all in. And it's the only movie this year, as much as I love a lot of the movies on this list, that I felt like, Rye, you said you were looking for that moment. I got that in Nomadland.
Nice.
My number 1, gentlemen, as you already guessed, is also Nomadland. There's movies that you like, and there's movies that you love, and then there are those very, very rare films that you see that transcend the entire thing that we talk about every week of going to the movies. This was a spiritual experience for me, and I've already watched it twice. I think it's definitely also about change, like Brian was saying, but it's about so much more. It's like letting go, moving on. There's stoicism in it. There's just this unbelievable beauty to it. Frances McDormand almost glows. I mean, I feel like that's almost too trite a term to use for what she does on the screen. She's a woman who we don't traditionally think of as like a beautiful bombshell woman, right? But she is so beautiful in this movie. I was like transfixed with her and her character. And you're right, Brian, by using some non-actors and newcomers, it almost at times feels like an intimate documentary, like you're inside a slice of real life, and the episodic nature of it, how it doesn't just resolve. It's like listening to a song that is missing a note. And rather than that being annoying or unsatisfying, we're left to fill in that note and sort of resolve each verse of the song on our own. And I think that's where that vacuum sucks you in. I can't describe how much I love this movie. It's my number 1 of the year by a long shot. And I was saying to Ryan, it might be my favorite film, period, right now. I liked it that much.
Like ever made?
I think so. I mean, there's a few that I constantly tout out as my number 1. And at one time it was Repo Man, Alex Cox's film. So that's
great. No, it's great.
That tells you where I'm coming from. I think my tastes have changed as I've aged.
Repo Man's still great, Matt.
I agree. I agree. Shawshank, certainly. Big Lebowski's up there as well. But neither one of those were that spiritual, maybe Big Lebowski. But this movie's just, it'll knock you down. It's that good.
Funny, we talked about films a lot on this list that like tapped into the mood and the zeitgeist in different ways, like Five Bloods with the protests and She Dies Tomorrow with anxiety. This movie did so in 2020 in a very unusual way. The way these makeshift communities that we've been cut off from, like the fact that we can't really travel the world right now. And then, of course, the employment issues dealt with in this film. People have lost their jobs all over the country this year. And that's a part of this movie, an industry that's shut down. It just feels to me like the 2020 movie.
Yeah.
It's the movie that is emotionally registering with the lack of racial issues. Maybe it doesn't really address that, but other than that, it feels like the 2020 movie in terms of mood and tone. Honestly, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I feel like if you take Nomadland and my number 2, Defy Bloods, you really do get a good picture of 2020 in film.
There you go. And you know, I've been just missing the movie theater experience for so much, and you think of it normally as you're missing these movies that are big blockbusters, and that's why you're sad that you can't go to the Cineplex. But how crushing was it that you didn't get a chance to see Nomadland on the big screen with a crowd of community around you? Because the cinematography and just gorgeous. I'd love to see it re-released when we have a chance to go back to the theater.
Maybe.
I don't want to speak for the rest of the programming committee, but I think we've talked about the Chicago Critics Film Festival a lot on this podcast. And when it does come back, and it will come back, we're going to play some 2020 movies that you never got to see on the big screen. That's kind of one of my goals. I'd like to see Defy Bloods on a big screen.
Nice.
I'd like to see Nomadland on a big screen. I'd like to see all kinds of these movies that no one got to see on the big screen. I'd like to be able to show you all Palm Springs with a sold-out crowd at Music Box.
Nice.
There.
Nice.
Right. I'm in.
So you're telling me I can see The Father without the counter below the
we'll do that one special for you in the small room at the Music Box.
I love it. All right. Leaves it for my number 1. And I swear to God, when I wrote this down as my number 1, I thought, well, the bad thing is I'm sure these guys are going to already talk about this film. It didn't come up. It did not come up.
Halloween.
And I know.
I got to guess. Can I guess?
No. Because I have never had a David Spade film as my number 1, and I still don't. And I still don't.
Jesus.
What's your guess, Brian?
Promising Young Woman.
Not right.
Oh.
I have seen it, and I did like it.
First Cow.
It is First Cow.
Is it really?
Kelly Reichardt's film.
I love First Cow.
And
I'm glad. First Cow is a much better movie than Promising Young Woman, so I'm
yes.
glad I'm at it.
You know, it's a gentle film. This is how I described it. It's a gentle film, and you got to
just outside my top 10. You
got to be in the right mood a lot of times for a Kelly Reichardt film, and we talked about it when we reviewed it on The Jaw. It's a slow burn. Be ready. If you have the patience, you're in for an absolute treat here, guys. It's about 2 travelers on the run from hunters. We're talking early 1800s Northwest. And Cookie and King Lou are my new favorite duo to come around in a long time. I love these 2 actors. And, you know, they have this dream of striking it rich by selling these oily cakes. And to make these oily cakes, they have to steal milk from a cow. And this is the only cow in the territory. Milk cow, as they refer to it. And they go there and they steal the milk, and the scenes with Cookie actually milking the cow and this connection that he has with the cow are fantastic. But when I thought this could possibly be my number 1 was definitely the scene where I love when a movie sneaks up on you emotionally and you don't think that, you don't see it coming, right? It sort of blindsides you. And for me, that moment when their house is ransacked near the end, I felt this ball of emotion in me that I didn't know why it was coming for, you know, almost it didn't seem like that was the moment they wanted me to be that emotionally moved. But yet that was the scene that really got me, was when this house that they have sort of built together that represents so much that I didn't think it represented so much. So that's the sign of a good movie, is it underplayed that. I just went right in that when I saw that house get ransacked, I was actually moved. And of course, the ending is even more moving. First Cow, I think, is the best film of 2020.
The ending that ties to the beginning. So you know kind of where it's going. Well, I think you're emotional in that beat because you kind of still remember the beginning. You know what's found and where this is going to end without spoiling anything. Kelly Reichardt is one of the best living American filmmakers, in my opinion. And anyone who's listening should see Meek's Cutoff, Wendy and Lucy, Certain Women, all of them. I like First Cow a lot. It's right outside my top 10, and I'm glad it made one of our. If I had known it wasn't going to make anyone's top 10, I might have included it in mine just to make sure.
Nice.
First Cow, I know why you were so affected by that moment. It's because it feels like your pillow fort, your blanket and pillow fort that you would make. Because at the center of this movie is a masculine friendship,
True.
and that's something that a lot of males struggle with. And it's so innocent and pure. When you said gentle, Ryan, we're talking about Cookie. He's one of the most gentle characters presented on film this year. The rest of the movie is kind of brutal, maybe not violent, but the lifestyle and the setting they live in is a very brutal place. And when we see that little fort that they built together, which we can all relate to, it tugs at your heartstring a little bit. I thought the movie was a little slow for me, but I did
all
have
of her movies are. All of her movies are slow. This actually might be fast for her, but if you can appreciate, Certain Women is slower. Meek's Cutoff is slower. But see them all. She is phenomenal.
Agreed. That was my number one pick, First Cow. For our Patreons, we'll actually do our 11 through 15 for them, Matt K. Okay?
Okay, that sounds good.
That sound like a bonus for them?
That's a great bonus.
Some movies? Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we have Jawhead feedback. And believe it or not, Matt, there was a Jawhead that wrote in his favorite pick of the year that I saw just because of the feedback. So we'll talk about that.
Nice. Plus,
Matt, you are taking Brian on in George Clooney movie trivia, not to mention Phil's movie of the year. Stick with us.
In celebration of Gary Oldman, we bring you this handy clip of Gary Oldman opposite the great Sean Penn in State of Grace.
You want another beer?
I'd love one.
Oh, one. Cheers. Sister still around?
Nah, Kate moved way the fuck uptown. You wouldn't recognize her.
Yeah.
Terry. Check this out.
What the fuck is that?
It's Frankie's idea. You got your favorite gun, right? He got so sick and tired of tossing away a perfectly good piece after every job. You take your hands and you take your gun, but you put the prints on the gun, you stash it. The cops find the gun. They're looking for a dead man.
This is somebody's hands?
Yeah. Hey.
What are you touching them for?
Terry, May Flynn.
Yo, no, don't fuck with me. No, don't fuck with me. Don't. You're gonna get fucked. What are you touching? No, that's somebody's hands.
You scared?
Get the fuck.
All right, hands up.
Put them back. They're in. Look, they're in. All right? You're a sick pup.
I know. Let me see this.
You're a very sick pup.
And we are back on Cinemajaw, hanging out with Brian Tallerico of RogerEbert.com. Brian, for the Jawheads listening to this, where do you want to guide them online to read your reviews and also follow you on Twitter and all that good stuff? Because you are a tweeting machine.
Oh, that makes me feel like I'm on Twitter too much. Brian with an I _ Tallerico, Tallerico. Most of my work is on RogerEbert.com. I do a lot for Vulture and a lot this year for The Playlist, which is kind of new. So check out Vulture, The Playlist, RogerEbert.com, and Twitter, Brian _ Tallerico.
Putting you on the spot here. Didn't even say we were going to do this during the break. Your number one TV show of 2020, just your number one. What is your pick?
Better Call Saul. the best drama of the last 5 to 6 years.
Wow.
A perfect, nuanced piece where every scene matters and every performance works.
Take that, The Queen's Gambit.
It's great. I love Queen's Gambit. It's
There you
very
go.
good. Top 10. But
Nice.
Saul's the best.
All right, Matt, before we get to Midnight Sky and before we get to trivia, we threw a couple items into the jaw box. We threw a couple items into the fish tank, and I know Phil wants to swim up to the top. Let's open up that fish tank.
Wait a moment! It's fish! Isn't it?
DC! Wake up! Wake up! No, Pat, it's a giant glass bowl. Hey, get some fish folk.
Who's coming with me besides Flipper? Here.
That's a Sicilian message. It means Luca Brasi sleeps with the fishes.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Yes, thank you. It's very good to be out because my back was starting to hurt, cramped in there. We only have one question in here, so I'm going to get right to it. It was, where can you stream Black Bear? And to answer, I have good news and bad news. The good news is that I can confirm as a third party that Brian is correct. The RogerEbert.com streaming link is immaculate. It works perfectly. It's wonderful. The bad news is that we live in Illinois, and Spectrum is the only place it's included in your subscription, and they do not operate here. But you can
get a
rent and buy it
VPN
everywhere as well. Spectrum is a service. It's like Comcast, but we don't. Yeah, and I only know that because I lived in Los Angeles for a year. So anyone on the West Coast, you're great.
Well, we also got some feedback, as I mentioned.
We sure do, Ryan. Yeah, we've been hearing from the Jawheads a lot toward the end of the year, and it's great. So everybody, please keep them coming. Hearing from you guys is really, honestly, the best kind of reward we can get from doing a show like this. Speaking of which, Lorenzo from Canada wrote in to say, "Hello, gents. What an awesome episode this week with Jim Terry. What a wonderful interview you guys did. Art is so necessary, especially as lots of us are heading into a very solitary winter coming up. It's as important as ever to make sure to support creators, and your episode this week reminded me of that. So I quit with the excuses and finally joined your Patreon. Thank you very much. Been listening since 2014 and so happy to be an official Jawhead now. It would have been so easy to pack the show in when the pandemic hit and the studios closed, but not only did you keep the show rolling, it's better than it's ever been. Thanks for all the hard work, gentlemen. You've really created something that brings a lot of joy to people. Keep it up and stay safe and healthy, Lorenzo." Wow. That one floored me,
awesome.
dude. Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, Lorenzo. Kind words, that means a lot. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you for becoming a Patreon. It means everything to us, the lifeblood of the show. So thank you so much for the support and listening and that wonderful email. Love it.
Yeah, we have some great feedback from a couple of folks who were giving us suggestions, as Ryan had mentioned earlier. One of them, he heeded the advice. This one from Joel Copling. It says, "Matt and Ryan, as you're about to record your lists of the year's best, please catch up with
three pleases,
three, all lowercase, but there are three. Please catch up with Bloody Nose, Empty Pockets. It's for rental now on most platforms, and it's the movie experiment of the year. A motley crew of customers patronize a bar in Las Vegas on its final night of operation. Yet, there is a major question. What's real? What's not? And does that even matter? They decide not to give anything else away, but they do mention to look into the films behind the scenes after watching everything. It's a genuinely moving film that also keeps you on your toes and engages the senses, so to speak. It's the best film of the year, although Brian only has it at number 25 for some reason, and I'd love for you guys to see it."
Well, I went ahead and caught Bloody Nose, Empty Pockets in preparation. It was written down in my journal. It must have come up somewhere in conversation before. And so when I read that email, I thought, well, it's in my journal already. And then he mentioned it. I thought, I'm going to go ahead and check it out. Very interesting film. And it made me long to have a beer in a bar with my friends in the absolute worst way. It's special, but I have not seen the behind the scenes footage that he's talking about. Did not make my top 10, but I do recommend Bloody Noses, Empty Pockets?
I have to say, Phil says it's my 25 out of around 400. So I like it quite a bit. I think it's very, very good. 25 is good.
Hell yeah.
There was some controversy at Sundance if it should be in the documentary category because it's not quite a documentary because it's kind of staged and it's not really taking place in Las Vegas at a bar. But I think it's a documentary. I like movies that push genre definitions and medium definitions, and I think it's great.
Cool.
Agreed.
Oh, I'm definitely checking this one out.
Yeah, do.
Oh, you love it.
Yeah,
man.
I 100%.
Your bar background, my God.
Yep. I was
like
watching, I was watching this, Brian, and I thought the same thing. Matt's got to watch this movie.
Yeah, it's you would love it. You have to revise your top 10. This is totally your kind of movie.
I mean, Bloody Nose and Empty Pockets is how I end nights and start days like 4 or 5 days a week. So
what else we got in there, Phil?
Matt, you've been living with your family this entire quarantine, and now I'm worried.
Yeah, that's not true. I was just trying to sound cool, but I had my days.
Anyone wearing a Misfits shirt, which he is now, should see Bloody Nose, Empty Pockets.
All right.
I love it.
We have one more piece that we wanted to read this week. This one is from Dion from East Lansing. We've heard from Dion a lot of times over the years. He writes to us, I've only seen 85 2020 films, and I give 5 stars to only 3 of them. First Cow, The Sound of Metal, and Emma. Of those 3, I'd give the nod to First Cow as the best I've seen this year.
Thank you.
I think we know why he listens now. I love a good minimalist film that gives you 0 superfluous material. I do have to say I did give 5 stars to Hamilton too, but I'm not really sure if that's considered a film. Thanks, Dion.
Awesome.
And I agree it's not a film.
Love
We
hearing
didn't
from
talk
Dion.
about Sound of Metal. It's a film. It's a documentary. Documentaries are films. Anyway, not enough on that. Sound of Metal we didn't mention, and that's a very good movie.
Absolutely.
Riz Ahmed is incredible. So.
Yep. We just talked about it here. So
I think it was my number 11, actually.
great to
Yeah,
hear
those are my
from
top 50.
the Jawheads. Phil, I pumped it. What's your number 1 of 2020 while we're in the fish tank?
Well, while we're here, so this is my number 1, the movie that I enjoyed the most this year, not anyone else's. And I will preface by saying I know it is bad. I know it is not good, but I enjoyed it more than anything else.
Cats.
No, that was last year. Wasn't that December 20?
Yeah, he's giving you a
2019?
hard time.
No, probably just as bad. Matt K did predict it. It is Sonic the Hedgehog. Okay, and I say this. Okay, we have the luxury of recording this.
I gotta go, everybody. We're on Zoom, and I gotta go.
I say this knowing that, or know that I bring so much emotional investment to this. There was a period when I first started on Cinemajaw where Matt had remarked that he did not know. It was. I remember the first time he had seen me not wearing a Sonic the Hedgehog t-shirt. I also, since we're in my bedroom, if we really want the visual aid, I sleep on Sonic bedding.
Wow.
Jeez,
Yes.
Phil.
I should wake my children up.
Yeah. It's truly something to be envious of. It's frustrating because, believe it or not, they don't make full-sized sheets with children's properties.
That's awesome, dude.
Oh, fantastic. Wow.
I know it was terrible, but I think true to what would be more Sonic than if it was, if it was bad.
Well done, Phil. Well
It was
done.
And that is
actually
my favorite.
way better than I expected it to be. Jim Carrey
It was awful.
is good in it. No, I don't think it was awful.
It was abysmal. It was it was terrible.
It's
it actually starts with record scratch. How did I get here? There is nothing forgivable about it.
Well,
but I
it
still
could have been
liked
worse,
it.
Phil. It could have been worse.
I don't know.
It's the only movie
My kids
I've
are excited
seen.
for the inevitable sequel. They're
I
11,
am too.
9, and
I'm
7.
frustrated that if a person of color was directing this, they would not have gotten a second chance with those designs.
That's fair. It's the only movie I've seen 3 times this year. And it's because
There
of
you go.
my children, but I liked it.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, before we close the fish tank, little housekeeping here. Next week on the show, Mark Dusick returns to Cinemajaw. We are covering our top 5 best performances of 2020. So if you're listening to this early in the week, please shoot us an email. feedback@cinemajaw.com. Let us know your favorite performance of the year. We will read it on the show. I think that's everything in the fish tank, right?
I believe so.
All right. Jump back in there, you hedgehog.
Will do.
I'll throw Delroy Lindo, Carrie Coon, Jesse Buckley, and Amanda Seyfried in Mank, which is a movie we haven't talked about at all, but she's phenomenal in that movie. I'll throw those into the performances piece.
Perfect.
Yeah, those are good picks.
They can hear the music playing. You guys can hear the music playing. It means one thing, Matt K.
Yeah.
It's time for movie trivia.
All right.
All right. And in honor of George Clooney, not only starring, but also directing The Midnight Sky, we are playing George Clooney movie trivia. I mentioned at the top of the podcast, Matt, I got rid of the 2 easy questions. They always start off with 2 layups. And there's been feedback that's come in of jawheads that have been disgruntled and say, just tell them the answers on number 1 and 2. They're that easy. So,
well, what it does is when we have a lay person as a guest, somebody who's not a film critic, it makes them feel some confidence and gets the ball rolling.
Right.
You need a warm up too, though. That's a little rude.
Yeah.
I still like the warm up.
All right. No warm ups. Well, the first one may be slightly a warm up, but Brian, you're our guest. You get to choose if you want to go first. Let Matt K go first. There are steals, and if you get hung up on any question, you get 1 rescue. Rescue me, Ryan.
I'll let Matt go first.
Wow. Question 1 over to Matt K. Matt, George Clooney has starred in 1 film directed by Brad Bird. It came out in 2015. Name it.
That's not a layup.
That's not a layup at all.
I told you I got rid of the layups. I threw them away.
I hear Brad Bird, and the only thing I can think of is Edna Mole and The Incredibles. I know I should know all of his films and be able to just pull them right out of a hat. But I can't. I don't know. Number 1. I'm passing.
Wow, he does not know this one. Brian, you get a chance for a steal and take a 1-0.
Tomorrowland.
One more time.
Tomorrowland?
That is correct. Yes.
Never saw it.
You shouldn't.
I've been told yes.
Tomorrowland is the correct answer. It is 1-0, Brian, and question 2 is over to him. Brian, George Clooney has made 1 movie with the dude, Jeff Bridges. Name it.
Oh, wow. That's not a layup either.
The layup's long on here.
They both have been in so many movies. It's going to be obvious. But I
I
can't,
will say, because I did write it down and I didn't include this in the
Yeah, you
question.
gave him a year.
Right.
Give me a year.
I did have the year down. It came out in 2009. George Clooney and Jeff Bridges in a movie that came out in 2009. The only
So he was deep in his
they were
Rooster Cogburn phase, or close to it at that point. I don't know.
This is a tough one. Question 2. Boy, I did good questions.
Tron Legacy.
No.
Matt, is that your guess?
That's
You have
my
no
guess. Yeah, no, that wasn't a joke.
We were looking for The Men Who Stare at Goats.
Oh, that's right.
Right.
Yeah.
The Men Who
Yeah.
Stare at Goats.
Tron
That was
Legacy.
2009?
Yeah.
That was that long ago?
That's a long
Sure
time.
was. It is 1-0. Brian, question 3 over to Matt K. Matt, George Clooney has now directed 7 feature films.
Wow.
He stars.
Name them all.
No, he stars or appears in 6 of them. Name the 2017 film he directed but does not star in.
2017.
George Clooney directed but does not appear in. Brian,
that-
from the look on it on the
I
Zoom,
know Brian
this
knows
one.
this. Yeah, it's obviously he knows it. So I'm gonna guess this is the one that he directs but does not star in.
Wait, I'm not sure all of a sudden.
Charlie
I'm
Wilson's
questioning my
War.
own.
Which one, Matt?
Charlie Wilson's War.
Brian's laughing at you.
Is that even directed by Clooney? I don't know.
No, it's not a Clooney, and that was a long, long time ago. All right.
The year is throwing me off. I thought I knew it immediately, but now I'm
George
not positive.
Clooney, only film
Yeah.
that he's directed but does not appear in, came out in 2017. Name the film.
Suburbicon.
That, my friends, is correct.
That's 17? Wow,
Yeah.
that feels like more recent than that.
2-0, Brian. Question 4 is over to him. Brian, Clooney has won 2 Oscars, one for acting in Syriana. What did he win the other for?
Good night, good luck.
That is
Righty.
That is incorrect.
Ooh.
Oh, no?
That is incorrect. Matt, you got a chance for a steal and to make it a ball game here.
So what is Clooney's other Oscar for?
Mm-hmm. One was for acting, Syriana. What was his other Oscar for?
Oh, it's producing, maybe.
I think
Not
maybe
to
it's
give it away.
producing, Ryan.
He's giving you a hint there, but you got to tell me the movie.
He was nominated for
Good Night and Good Luck was a damn good guess. That's where definitely I would have gone.
I thought that one screenplay, and I thought he co-wrote it.
Gravity. Did he produce Gravity? I'm just going to go for it.
Didn't win picture, though.
He is incorrect, but he did win for producing the best picture of Argo.
Oh.
Believe it or not.
You could have given me 24 hours, I wouldn't have gotten that. I could have Google searched and not gotten that. I had no idea.
All right. I told you I wrote these tough ones because we had Brian on the show. So I made them extra tough here. It's 2-0, Brian. Question 5 over to Matt K. Matt, George Clooney has made one movie with Holly Hunter. Came out in the year 2000. Name the film.
Holy
Jesus, man.
Wow.
Yeah.
20-year-old film.
Deep picks.
Holly Hunter, George Clooney.
Shouldn't even trivia
Holly
anymore.
Hunter,
This is
George Clooney.
Boy, I have no idea. I have a feeling that this was like some sort of indie gem romantic comedy. And I don't know. I'm not up on my Clooney at all.
Final answer?
Tron Legacy.
Incorrect. Brian, chance for a steal here. Holly.
Oh, brother, where art thou?
Wow. Oh, brother, where art thou is correct. He
Holly
nailed
Hunter?
it. Yes.
Yeah, it's got a small part.
Yeah. Wow. I did not think
I
Brian,
know my cone. If you ever want to do cone trivia, I would.
did not think Brian
rock
was going to get
that.
that. It is 3-0, Brian. It's a slaughter at this point. Question 6 over to Brian Tallerico. Name George Clooney's co-star in the 2003 film Intolerable Cruelty.
Catherine Zeta-Jones.
4-0, Brian.
As I just said, Coen Brothers, we could do that all
But that's
day.
their least known, right? I think.
It's their worst movie,
Yeah,
too,
they're
but
least
still.
known and worst. That's why I threw it on the list. 4-0, Brian. The game's over at this point. Question 7 over to Matt K. Matt, George Clooney and John C. Reilly have appeared in 2 films together. Name them both.
Whoa.
Step Brothers.
Tron Legacy.
All right, let me actually think here. John C. Dude, I have no idea.
John
Just
C.
rescue me,
Reilly.
Ryan. Rescue me,
Ryan. Wow. And
I'm very tired.
your clue is there's a red storm.
Oh, I got no one of them.
Oh.
Is that for both movies? That's the clue?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
That's for both.
Red Storm.
Yes.
That didn't help me at all. My brain is just shutting down. John C. Reilly. It was Wreck-It Ralph and
Tron Legacy.
No, you would think Tron Legacy, but actually it was Wreck-It Ralph 2. Ralph Breaks the Internet. Those were the 2.
Incorrect. Brian, do you got a guess? And after the
Perfect
clue.
Storm is one of them.
Yep.
What's red? I'm trying to figure out what red is.
Red Dawn remake?
Yeah, the Red Dawn remake. The Red Dawn remake and Perfect Storm.
We were looking for a thin red line.
Oh, right.
A thin red line. Believe it or not, large
Perfect
cast,
Storm.
but you can see why that would be tough. Last question of the game. Brian's won it 4-0. Brian, George Clooney and Julia Roberts have appeared in 4 movies together. Ocean's 11 and Ocean's 12. Name the other 2.
There's no way.
You do have a rescue me, Ryan, if you need it.
Sure, give me that.
All right. Your rescue here, Brian, is it's a dangerous monster.
Money Monster. Wait, no.
Yes.
So is Roberts in Money Monster?
It was, yes. Julia Roberts and George Clooney are in Money Monster.
Okay.
Yep. That's one of them. And Dangerous.
Dangerous Liaisons.
I don't think so.
No. You'd have to confess to that one, Matt K.
Confessions of a Dangerous
There
Man.
we go.
Money Monster was, as long as we're on this, Clooney's last starring role before Midnight Sky 4 years ago.
How interesting is that?
He was not on camera since 2016's Money Monster.
That is incredible.
He's been making too much tequila.
So
he took the Trump administration off. Who can blame him?
5-0. 5-0. Brian wins this one. Can we get a virtual handshake here, guys?
Virtual
Thank you.
fist bump. There you go.
Brian, if it came down to a tie, this question would have been over to you. George Clooney, good director or no?